One of the things that happens is that we look at all the things that we're recommended to do, and we're just one person, so it's intimidating. So when you hear climate crisis, does anybody get scared? Okay. Does anybody want to hide? And does anybody ever feel helpless? Yes. Does anybody ever feel hopeless? That's why we're here. Because if we talk just to ourselves, we will confirm that we are hopeless and helpless. So it's together that we understand that something else is possible. So that's why you are invited, and we hope that several things will happen for you. You'll find hope, you'll find courage, you'll find practical solutions that are doable, you will find friendships and associations that give you the courage and encouragement when you don't feel like it. So these are each of the outcomes. So one of the things that will happen today is for you to write down your good intentions that get inspired. So we'll be handing out little pledge sheets and cards. This is for you. The cards are for you. The cumulative one won't have your name on it. But what it will do is it'll show each other, we can show each other, hey, we're doing something. And that is the way it happens. So what we've started, or the intention today, is to go from global to local. What is it that we can do that matters in our neighborhoods, in our homes? So that is our challenge today. And we have 3 people that are going to excite you, and they're not going to terrorize you, because they have been at this a long time, and how they keep on keeping on is a good question. So one of the reasons people keep on keeping on is they've got spirit. So we'll have Reverend Rigby talk about how do we get to the deeper part of ourselves, whether we're religious or not, so that we feel that spirit that can help us move.
I thought I was just supposed to do a prayer thing.
That'll work.
I wrote it out.
Okay. Well, that's actually good, because I don't believe in indiscriminate prayer. I know in a room like this, there's all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds, and some of you are not religious, and I consider it an act of violence to walk into somebody's psyche without consent, permission. So I never appreciate it myself when somebody does a prayer that I wasn't really prepared for. So I'm not going to do that to you. And I don't think that's what unifies us here anyway. I think the reason we are all here is because of a reverence that we have and a concern we have for the web of life, for whatever the ground out of which we come, whether you're a religious person, you think that's talking about creation, or whether you're absolutely, completely secular and atheistic, and that's not a difference in us, right? We're all family, and that reverence is what truly unites us. So I hope that you feel, even though you're in a church, I hope you feel honored, whatever your spiritual path is. Even if you don't like that word, come up with your own. I'm tired, so I'm not going to come up. But to me, all the great religions practice hospitality, which means to speak the common language in the room, the common experience. So not to claim special things that some of us believe and some of us don't believe, but to realize how important moments like this are, how important community is, even if that community is even just today. Because this is like an all-star cast up here of people who tirelessly, they may be making faces behind my back. I don't know. I do an active faith. But, anybody that cares about the planet knows the work of the people up here and is so grateful for that. But you're important too. Everybody who doesn't go to sleep right now counts as a champion. Because, it's like we're overwhelmed, but it's like everybody knows there's a problem. And yet, a lot of times you go to meetings and it's like a dump truck. It just makes you feel worse and worse and worse, and like the guilt and this stuff. We've got to change the whole system. Before we can do that, we have to change our minds and stuff and stop believing in this artificial value system that's the heart of our culture and stuff. So moments like this are very important and transformative. And what we're really talking about today is getting back to our roots. Not what we imagine about the world, but what we truly evolved from. And that's what unites us. And that's what's going to be powerful and helpful. I don't think success or failure is a good standard for prophetic work. The people that are doing the work are ahead of the curve, and so they're going to lose a whole lot more than they win. I'm saying the most important human beings of all time had series of losses that paved the way. So thank you for being here. Please know how important you are to this movement. Appreciate it. And thank all of you for being here. Is that okay?
Well, you all probably know these people, but I'm just going to tell you some things you may not know. First, Bridget Shea, she came here in '86, and she was an award-winning NPR journalist. So then she came here to found the Austin Water Program, and she has started more things than you can guess. But Richard told me to cut it down. So they'll have time to talk, because each of them have contributed so much to this beautiful world, or keeping it beautiful. And I think one of the other things a couple of other things, she sacrificed herself to be on the city council. And now she's sacrificing herself to be our county commissioner. And we do appreciate it, because it takes so much long, hard work. And she came out of the sickbed to be here today. So we'll say thank you. Next to her is Brandy. And I think Brandy must have gotten started when she was 3, because she's done so much. What she is one of her great gifts is she's a gatherer. And so whether it's the Keeping Austin Beautiful, whether it is Earth Day, she is behind it. She's got her fingers on all those gatherings. So we really appreciate that. The other way she gathers us is with the computer. And so the Eco Network tells us what all's going on. And when I read it every once a week and see what all's going on, I get so encouraged, because we don't know unless we look on there and see all the activities that different parts of Austin and are doing. The last thing that not the last thing, but one of the things she did is senior policy advisor to Mayor Adler. She helped set up the renewable energy, the watershed protection, lots. And then taking Austin global. That's what we want to do, is take local and ourselves to our neighborhoods to the globe. So she helped plan the COP21 in Paris climate meeting, and she helped the mayor with the C40 Cities Climate Summit. It's bringing all the cities together to see what we can do so we're not dependent on national. So thank you. And our moderator, thank you, Brandy. Let's give her a clap. And Richard said keep it short. So thank you, Richard. Richard has co-founded 3 national award-winning programs: American Youth Works, the Environmental Corps, and Casa Verde Buildings. So thank you, Richard. And he's going to be our moderator. And Mary Ferris will be leading us. She'll be doing the Q&A. Okay? Thank you.
Welcome.
8 seconds.
Am I on now? Can you all hear me?
It'll be in a moment.
Can't hear me yet? There you go. Okay, good. We are delighted that you're here. You're about to be handed out a pledge card. Is that right, Joe? We got pledge cards? Okay. So I'm going to show it to you, and this is what it looks like. I'm turning it a little sideways because I haven't got the dexterity. There it is. So we want you to accept this pledge card that will be handed to you, and we hope that during the talk today you'll think about the things that inspire you and that you're willing to put down so that you have a list in front of you of the things that you can do to change our world. Because frankly, that, as you all know, that's what it's going to take, is to change our world. And then this Take a Pledge is going to be passed out down the rows, and fill it in as you will. It's anonymous. I just want to tell ourselves and others here in the room that we will take actions to protect and to save and protect our planet. So that's what the pledge is all about. When it ends up in your lap, that's what we want you to do with it, if you will. Another housekeeping activity is we always like to recognize people who've given up so much of their time and talent to be an elected official. Because when you're an elected official and you really do it right, and you're honest and you're courageous and you get things done, changes the world. We have one of those people sitting right up here on the stage now, Bridget Shea, who does this sort of thing daily. I've also been informed that someone is running for as a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives from District 17, Rick Kennedy. Is Rick in the room? Rick, would you stand up? Okay. Thank you for running, Rick. Do we have other candidates or elected officials in the room who would be willing to stand up and let us appreciate them? Okay. At this time, we'd like to have these two Planet Warriors tell us about their opening remarks, their vision, and we'll be doing that. Each will get 10 minutes each. So, Bridget, could you start with you?
Sure. For years, I've tried to figure out how to talk to people about climate change in a way that they could hear it. I am a former reporter, and so for me, facts and evidence and data and information has always been important. And in fact, I got inspired to get involved working on climate change because of the testimony of a scientist. How many of you have heard of Dr. James Hansen? Oh, you're great. You're well ahead of most audiences that I speak to. He was the head of the Goddard Space Institute at NASA. And in the summer of 1988, I was working as a national press secretary in Washington, D.C., and he had testified to Congress about a phenomenon they'd been observing at the Goddard Space Institute. Their role was to look at planetary impacts, and they'd been trying to figure out what was going on, what was causing it, and they'd realized that the burning of fossil fuels was emitting a particulate pollution that was creating a blanket of pollution around the planet, and it was trapping the heat from the sun. And if it went unchecked, the planet would eventually heat up to the point where human life was no longer viable. And his testimony included some really startling, terrifying impacts if this trend went unchecked. And it was a front page story in the New York Times. I remember this really clearly. I read the story, I put the paper down, I was so freaked out. I picked up the phone and called other friends in Washington and said, "Did you see this story? We all have to drop what we're doing right now and work on this, or we can measure our coffins and get in." And I want to work for an organization that's working on this issue and helping to elect people who will do something about it, because it was clear the political will needed to change as well. And that's how I came to Texas. It was 1988. That scientist's testimony literally changed my life. And I think it's important to say that because it's often hard to be courageous and to speak out. And I think it's crucial that people know when you do speak out, it can literally change someone's life. So I came here to start the state chapter of Clean Water Action and have been working on climate-related issues ever since. but I really struggled with what seemed like a sort of a wall of denial. People who really argued with me about the science and the data around climate change. People who said the scientists were lying, that they'd been paid to lie. And I would say to people, do you know any of these scientists? None of them are getting rich. They're serious professionals who are dedicated to their field. They're not doing this to get rich. But it was as though people couldn't hear it. And I realized later, I think part of that is because it's some of the most terrifying conversations that we have. I mean, I have many friends who believe climate change is happening, and they'll still say, can we please change the subject? This is really depressing. Exactly. And so, so for me, it was partly an education process to just try and understand why was it people couldn't hear it? Why was it people were in denial? And I think that is partly a common response to something that's just so terrifying it's hard to look at. And I had an epiphany about 10 years ago, thinking about my own children. I have 2 sons. And I'd gone through times of hope and despair about being able to do anything about climate change. And I was thinking one day, what are they even going to know what to do? How can they be prepared so that they can survive climate catastrophes? And then I quickly realized, well, the whole planet needs that, and not just my kids. And I started thinking about how could I make a contribution at that level? And I think that's a helpful sort of method, because it's easy to get discouraged and despair. And so I think it's useful to just ask, what can I do? How can I make a contribution? And so in the context of thinking about my children and all future generations, I had never really wanted to prepare for climate change. I always wanted to stop it. And so I was never interested in all of the mitigation and the preparation associated with it. And frankly, there hadn't been that much of a focus. Most of the policy focus had been on trying to prevent it. And it was about 10 years ago when I realized, well, we missed that opportunity. We're really not going to be able to prevent it at this point. Too much has happened already. And so I started thinking, well, how could I make a contribution around trying to better prepare my children and humanity? And that's ultimately what led me to run for Travis County Commissioner. The county is actually the level of government in Texas, the unit of government in Texas that declares an emergency. So if there is a wildfire, if there's a flood, as what happened with Harvey in Houston, it was the county judge and the county that declared the emergency and had some of the authority and responsibility associated with it. And I spent a lot of time talking with people before I finally decided to run to see, could I really get things done at the county level? And the general consensus was yes, you could. There was enough latitude at the county to be creative and to pursue programs. And so that's what I've been doing at the county level. One of the things we asked early on was, what kinds of programs are in place already? And the answer was not many. And so we just started looking at a very basic level. What could we do? What might be helpful? And we talked with lots of people, and someone actually who'd been through a fire in Bastrop County, former county judge there, Randy Fritz, whose house burned down in the Bastrop fire of 2011. Were people here in 2011? Who was here in 2011 when those fires broke out? I think that was a big wake-up call for the community. But he said, what about a neighborhood-based fire drill? People don't know what to do in their neighborhoods when there's a fire. And it was a great idea. That was our response as well. And so we started with that. As part of my county commissioner precinct, I have a community out near Lake Travis called Comanche Trail. Nobody has to acknowledge this, but if you know where Hippie Hollow is, it's the community. It's the community just down that road. And if you have ever driven down that road, it's a long, narrow, windy, one-way in, one-way out road. And a lot of our communities in Travis County are like that. So people live at the end of a bottleneck. And that community has been aware for a long time that they were potentially in danger. And so I went to them and said, would you be willing to be part of an experiment with my office to do a neighborhood fire drill and see if that would be useful, see if that's something that we could then share with other neighborhoods. And they were, and I leveraged, frankly, the spare time of a lot of middle class and upper middle class residents, some of whom had been corporate executives who knew how to do project management, who knew how to organize their neighborhood, and we learned from that. And we actually ran the fire drill March 2nd, and I think it was a valuable experience for people. So we're in the process of taking all that information, and I'm working with a volunteer who is trying to boil it all down into sort of a step-by-step, because we had a large 3-ring binder at the end of it, which is not useful to share with people, nor will I kill that many trees copying it. So we're trying to boil it down into a 1 to 2 pager that we can share with other neighborhoods. And to me, that's a really important part about the whole future that we're facing. We know we will have more extreme weather of all kinds. It's a guarantee. We will have more extreme rainfall, so we will have more flooding. Areas that have never flooded before will flood. We've just looked at new data from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and we've proactively applied it at the county. Areas that were in the 500-year floodplain previously are now in the 100-year. Areas that were in the 100-year are now in the 25-year floodplain. So this will have an impact on many, many of us. Same with wildfires, same with drought, same with freak heat storms and ice storms. So extremes of all kind we will see more and more of. And I think in the same way that you wouldn't take your child to a swimming pool and throw them in before they had swim lessons, you shouldn't go into a future of certainly more extreme weather without preparing, without thinking, what can I do to be better prepared? So for me, that's a really big part of this is sort of resilience planning. And then the other amazing thing that I realized in the course of it is it completely shifts the conversation. I've talked with ardent climate deniers who have told me the scientists were being paid and were lying. And when I say, do you think that your community leaders should do what they can within limits to try and help you get out of harm's way from wildfires and floods and extreme weather and deadly weather of all kinds? They all say, of course. And I say, perfect. Let's skip that pointless debate about whether or not it's happening. And let's figure out what kinds of things can be done to try and help you and your communities be safer. And then it's a personal conversation. Then it's, I'm in danger, my family's in danger, my home's in danger, my neighbors are in danger. And then the next part of my conversation with people is, who do you think should pay for this? Because right now you're having to pay for all of it. Do you think it's fair that the people who actually caused it aren't having to pay for anything? And that's shifted people's thinking about it as well. I mean, I just saw Donald Trump making fun of the people in Houston and saying they got rich off of Hurricane Harvey, which is such a travesty. But he did point out some of the folly associated with a $12 billion seawall that they want to build to try and protect Galveston, Houston area from storm surges. That $12 billion, we're all getting a bill for that one. The oil companies are not having to pay a penny of it. And I think that's a really important conversation because I believe we should have climate litigation in the same way that we are currently in the midst of opioid litigation. And we previously saw tobacco litigation, holding the companies responsible who caused the problem. So part of what I'm doing at the county as well is preparing us for that. I've had many very public conversations with our budget staff saying we need to start another column on our budget sheets that account for the increased cost to the taxpayers for what is clearly climate related. So for instance, the new rainfall data I told you about that changed the floodplain, we know just on our bond projects from the 2017 bond election that it will increase the cost of those by $22 million, just for low water crossings, just for elevating roads out of the floodplain. That's a direct cost that should be reimbursed if there's justice in the world. So I'll stop there, but those are some of the things that I've been working on with the county, and I'll be happy to answer more questions as we go on.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you so much. Really terrific. Very practical ways to think about things and who should pay for them. Next, we are delighted and honored to have Brandy share her opening remarks with us.
Thank you. My name is Brandy Clark Burton. I grew up here in Austin. I've been a fan, a follower of both Richard and Bridget for years, and I'm honored to be invited to talk with you today. I have been active in the environmental space for about 20 years. I went to DC and worked for what is now called Green America in '99 and helped publish the National Green Pages, became the Green Business Screening Coordinator, and I sort of got my feet wet. And that was after hearing Ray Anderson speak about his epiphany running the Interface Corporation and realizing that corporations being run the way they were was completely not taking care of the people or the planet or the long-term prospects of the company even. And I got real interested in green business and how we do things more responsibly and how people hold companies responsible and companies convince us we need stuff and sort of the dynamic between those. And so I spent time in that space, and I, as was mentioned, started the Austin Eco Network about 17 years ago with Selwyn Pollitt, who's in the audience. He was my tech go-to person who kept it going for years, and now it's an independent website and newsletter that keeps about 10,000 people in the Austin area informed of what's going on with Austin and the environment. And so I've kind of been a connector of information and resources and people to advance sustainability in one way or another for a long time. But it really wasn't until last fall when the IPCC report and then the National Climate Assessment report came out. Can you cue the second slide, please? This was covered earlier, so I'm going to skip it right now. These were the two reports that had me, like Bridget, when reading the front page of the New York Times. I was like, holy moly, I need to drop what I'm doing. And I need to get on this. Like, this is existential, this is important, nothing else is really gonna matter if we don't figure this thing out, if we don't get active on climate. And, go to the next slide. I was very encouraged when nearly simultaneously I was exposed to this concept called drawdown. How many of you have the book or are familiar with the concept? Okay, about half the room, perfect. So drawdown is a reference to that point in time when the Earth is able to sequester more carbon than we're putting up in the atmosphere. There's a natural process that happens every year anyway, especially in springtime when the trees are putting on their new leaves and building mass in the trees and putting nutrients in the soil. It happens anyway. The problem is each year we keep emitting a little bit more and we keep cutting down more of the trees and things that are able to sequester. And so we've been kind of getting out of balance and it's been raising. Well, the good news of drawdown is that we have all the technology we need. Yes, we have impacts. I'm not denying that we do need to be prepared for the floods and fires and stuff that are impacting our communities already. But if we stop right there, like, oh well, we're hosed. There's nothing we can do but like hold the umbrella kind of thing. That is not where we need to stand. Where we need to stand is a vision of the future where if we implement what they did is they aggregated and compiled the top 80 strategies, ranked 1 through 80, and then 20 like coming attractions that are very promising. But these 1 through 80, if implemented at scale, are enough to reverse, not just slow down how fast we're messing things up on this planet, but reverse global warming. That to me is a radical concept. It's an entirely different framework to have in your head, like that this is a winnable game, that we can actually do this. And the good news is we have all the technology we need. Everything listed in the book is already happening. We don't need to wait for some, some savior technology to come along and do this. We know how. It's not like it's all available to us. So what's missing is willpower, right? Is investments, is getting people in action at scale. And so when I was exposed to this drawdown thing, I was like, wow, okay, I really want to start learning more about people and what resonates with people, what motivates people, what shuts them down. I was clear that up to this point, how we've talked about climate, completely ineffective. Doom and gloom, statistics, charts, like graphs, all this stuff that just makes people's eyes roll back in their head. And if it's not charts and graphs, it's pictures of mayhem and communities and children being like held, handed from a flooding, it's just all like very upsetting. And it's really hard as a human. Like if you're wired like a normal human, like that's hard to take in and do something with. And it's not that it's not real, and I'm not saying deny reality, but I think that the place we need to stand is much more positive, proactive, looking at the future we're living into. What's it going to take to create that future we want to live into, rather than just accepting what's here now? I just did a 10-day Vipassana silent meditation thing. It was very big deal for me to be quiet for 10 days and not be able to write down anything for 10 days. That was the hardest part. But one of the clearest lessons that came out of it is the law of nature. Everything changes. I mean, think about the seasons of the year. Like, it's just the cycles of life, right? It just everything changes. It's never the same. The river you're standing in front of 1 second and the river you're standing in front of the next second are not the same river. That water has gone by, the bottom is different, the fish that are different, like everything changes all the time. So when we accept this, when we embrace this, that things are the way they are right now, not because they will always be, or that we are doomed or destined to accept them. We get to create. We have a lot of power. Can you go to the next slide, please? So, very recently, the Yale School of Forestry does some great research on where we stand, where Americans stand in their minds as it relates to climate. And the super good news is that well over half of America believes that climate change is real, and more than half of those people are already in action, or about half of them are already in action politically, in their lives, in their businesses, things like that. Then there's cautious, and even though they're noisy and annoying and all that, the deniers, the active deniers, that's only 9% of the people. You guys, we can just tune them out. We've got to just ignore that. It is absolutely a distraction from what needs to happen, which is getting even more people from the cautious bucket into the concern, and people from concerned into alarm. Because the difference between alarmed is you believe it's real and you're in action, and the concerned just believe it's real, but they're not doing something yet. So we have a lot of people who are ready to be mobilized, right? Like there is a lot. You think about who you go to work with, who is in your congregation, who you're surrounded by. I'm going to move to so the next one. I just want to show you the trend in this. And this was as of last December. No, December of 18. I think if it was taken now, again, the numbers would already be different. But in just 2.5 years, the number of alarmed increased dramatically. The number of concerned even went up. Cautious went down because they went to the others. But even the dismissive, even a few of the deniers have come over. And his name is escaping me right now, but the guy who is the key messenger for the Republicans who came up with the term climate Luntz. Yes, Frank Luntz. He has now come out and said, I was wrong to sow doubt about the climate science. I mean, he lived in California, it was very near some of the fires that happened, and he is absolutely kind of woke. I would say America is more woke on this than we admit, and we're behind other countries. We have a lot to work with here. We have the technology we need, we have people who know that this is an issue and want to either are or want to be in action, and those who are in action want to be in more action. So we have a rich place to take action from. Next, please. So, this comes back to you. So there's you and little old me. What could I possibly do in the face of a global climate crisis? It's so big. What could I do? Well, next slide, please. There's a lot you can do. And you have way more power than you think you do. Because this refers to 4 levels of action, which I was exposed to when I took, and I encourage you to take the Introduction to Drawdown hosted by the Pachamama Alliance. Pachamama is still doing great work, and they've teamed up with Drawdown to walk people through the basics of this and how to understand and think about it. But these 4 levels of action, level 1 is you, what you do yourself, the food you eat, the car you drive, the house you're in, all that kind of stuff. Level 2 is your friends and family. These are people you have direct contact with on a regular basis, probably some affinity, probably some trust built up. You can have impact by talking to those people and sharing them what you're doing already, what you're not doing already but you want to, and what's in the way, and how could you overcome that maybe together. The third level is at that organizational level. The institutions, the groups that we interface with, the place you go to work, the place where your kids go to school, your congregation, your local government, any place where you could, within a week or two, get an appointment with a decision maker and have some sort of impact on how things go. That's at level 3. And then level 4 is that sort of like the big level policy stuff, the state and federal level. And most environmental action kind of stuff and outreach in the past has really focused on level 1 and level 4, like what you can do and the big policy stuff. But there's so much juicy stuff in that level 2 and 3, the people we're connected to and the institutions that we have direct impact on. And so I'm going to encourage you to think about you, because I am deeply inspired by Greta. I think you're all going to show a video later, but Greta Thunberg, I'm going to say that close, right? If one little 16-year-old girl from Sweden can mobilize international governments to consider and reconsider what they're doing, I think you can impact your congregation and your workplace. I really think that you have a lot more power than you believe, and you can take that influence out. And so I think that might be the last one here, right? That's it for now. Yeah. Let me review my notes real quick. Yeah, so the action and dialogue, one of my favorite people who talks about climate is from here in Texas. Her name is escaping me this second. From Texas Tech. Thank you, Catherine Hayhoe. I'm sorry, my brain was like, Catherine Hayhoe says the most important thing we do about climate is talk about it. It really is, if it's in the conversation, if it's part of the just like what we talk about at dinner, what we talk about at meetings, what we talk about in policy, the people who are running for office, or what are you doing on climate? It's like, it's just part of the soup. You go to a business, you're patronizing, you're like, do you have, like, why are you using straws? Or can you just, I've asked so many places, could you just like keep those in the back and only bring them out if somebody asks for one? Like there's some people who have a legitimate reason to use a straw for medical purposes, but like most of us don't need them, but we can be vocal in shaping the world around us by calling out and requesting things to go more the way we know are healthier. Single-use disposable plastics, all the disposable culture we have is just not sustainable. And so I'm excited in the Q&A to get to the part where we get to share more of the what you can do stuff.
Thank you, Brandy.
Talk about
yeah. I think we're speaking to the alarmed and concerned here, if
Yes.
not mostly alarmed
You guys are
and
the
active.
heroes. Yeah.
So, ladies, if you will help us out here with these questions. I had the privilege of combining these questions with these two marvelous leaders here a few minutes ago. So, what specific challenges and potential crises lie ahead for those of us living in Central Texas? Now, I know you mentioned some of these already,
Yeah.
but I think if you could summarize them again and annotate as you describe them the kind of things you think people can do, not to be just prepared for them, but to also intervene whenever possible in them happening.
I think one of the biggest things that we will have to deal with yeah, he's raising my volume. I think one of the biggest things we're going to have to deal with in the near and long-term future is we will likely run out of water. If you look at long-term weather trends for this region, it is hotter, it's becoming hotter and drier. The dry line is moving to the east. Jay Banner from the University of Texas has a really kind of startling slide, part of which is drawn from eons of tree ring analysis, looking at extreme drought in the past. And there's evidence in this region of droughts lasting an unimaginably long period of time. And we live as though there will always be water. And there will always be an unending supply of water, and we can waste as much of it as we want.
Okay, can I jump in with what you can do? Like the top number one thing you can do, not have a lawn that you water. Absolutely, hands down, by times 10 or 100, more impactful than turning off the water while you brush your teeth or any of these other things. Lawns suck. They suck water. They do not belong in Central Texas.
Absolutely.
Period, end of story. We need to make it super uncool to have a big, great expanse of green lawn. It's like, yeah, you're kind of behind the times. It's like seeing a smoker to these days. It's like, wow, haven't you got the message yet? That's just not cool.
Some of the really large houses in our community actually not only use treated drinking water to pour on their lawns, they've dug wells, and they are depleting groundwater to have golf course-like lawns around their home. It is worse than super uncool. It's completely unsustainable. Oh, and by the way, Congressman Michael McCall is the largest water waster in the entire region. Yeah.
Replace him, please.
So water is going to be a huge issue in the future, and we're already starting to see some of those battles shaping up. One of the longer term plans, which I don't support, is to run water pipelines to the east where they have more groundwater and more surface water, and pipe it here so we can continue wasting it on an epic scale. The thing that I've been working on at a policy level and a structural level, and it's something that you can do where you work, because this largely impacts larger buildings, like a church, for instance. One of the largest use of water in a big building like this is for what? Anybody call out an idea? What do you think it is?
Toilets.
Toilets, any other suggestions? Any other thoughts? Air conditioning, somebody said. That, people don't realize it, but the way large buildings are air conditioned is by evaporating off water. And so just to give you an example, the University of Texas complex uses somewhere between 300 and 5, maybe north of 500 million gallons a year to air condition the campus. Same is true for the Capitol complex. At the county level, we have we have a few more, but 4 larger office buildings in the downtown. Anybody know where the old courthouse is? The Heman Marion Sweat Courthouse, that's one of them. There's a jail and court complex right behind it. There's our county attorney's building, which is kitty corner across the street from the old courthouse, and then our county administration building at 7th and Lavaca. When I took office, I pushed to convert this source of the water supply for the air conditioning system away from treated drinking water to treated wastewater. The City of Austin has a purple pipe system, and they haven't built it out as much as they need to, but
Which is treated.
it's treated wastewater.
Yeah.
And they call it purple pipe to distinguish it from drinking water. So anytime you hear people talk about purple pipe or reuse water, it's treated wastewater. So we swapped out, instead of using treated drinking water for our air conditioning, we swapped out for treated wastewater. It was just a matter of connecting to a different pipe because the city had run the pipes near those buildings. Any guesses for how much water we've permanently removed from the demand side just from swapping out those 4 buildings?
100 million.
That's a little high. Our 4 buildings downtown, but that's on the scale of the amount of water these large buildings use. Just those 4 buildings will permanently remove the demand for 10 million gallons of treated drinking water every year in perpetuity. Wow. Yeah, just that. Oh, and by the way, it'll pay for itself in, I think, 6 or 7 years just because of the difference in the cost. But that's something that people can do in their churches. Now the city has to have the purple pipe water available. In Wells Branch, you may have opportunities for other treated wastewater supplies. It's worth looking into.
Can I life hack
Yeah.
for the homeowner? We have the condensate water from our AC system drip into our rain barrel. You will not believe how much water comes. I mean, it's like full all the time, and it's not because it rained. It's just from the air conditioning system.
And what that
totally
is,
available to you, otherwise just dripping in your yard.
and what that is distilled water.
It's perfectly clean. Like
It is the
super-
cleanest
super
water.
Clean.
It's distilled water. And if you're walking downtown in the summer and it's hot and there hasn't been rain for months, but you see water running down the curb on the street, that's condensate from air conditioning systems that they're just flowing out into the street.
Yeah, we need to capture and use that.
So that is one of the things, in particularly in new designs, but also in retrofit of older buildings, you can easily turn that pipe, which would otherwise flush or drip the condensate from the air conditioning system onto the curb and the sewer, turn that back into your system as part of your water supply.
City Hall already does that.
City Hall does that. The new library has a very efficient system that combines both rainwater and treated wastewater for all of their non-potable uses. So for instance, if you go in the new library, there are signs in the bathrooms that say, it's okay if the toilet water is a little yellow after you flush, it's because it's treated wastewater and rainwater. We'll be doing that in the new county courthouse as well. We've had to push the contractors and monitor them to make sure they're doing this right. And we did commit to pay additional money on it, but we will save money over the lifetime of the utility costs. But the reality is, in the future, we will all be drinking treated effluent, which is wastewater, and there won't be enough of it if we keep wasting it on the level that we currently are. So this is a conversation you can have with every office building manager where you work, every congregation that you attend, every large building that you go into. So that's just one of the realities, but it will have a huge impact on our community in the future. And I'm on a number of different boards that look at sort of long-range planning. And one of the things that I say frequently is, how are we preparing to have a sufficient water supply when all of the coastal populations of Texas and the world will have to relocate here? And people look at me as if I am from Mars. I mean, some will laugh, and others clearly have never considered it. But that is another reality that we will all be living with. I believe it's going to happen in most of our lifetimes, is we will see the forced relocation of the coastal populations of the world inland. And we're obviously an attractive place to live, but I think all of Central Texas will see the impact of this forced relocation of people from coastal areas. Today, the streets of Miami flood when there's a high tide. People in coastal areas will have to relocate or completely redesign their buildings so that they can either float or be on stilts. And so those are just a few of the things that we'll need to be preparing for.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on the what you can do. I'm going to be the what you can do gal. So at your home, if you are going to remodel, if you're going to buy a home, if you're going to build a home especially, her husband has been working for years in the green building program. We have really great experts in the city who can help you design your addition or your home or your remodel to be green, to be leaving you in the end using less energy and less water than you would have if you just went with regular stick frame construction with, whatever the general contractors do. And I just want to, in the last week, the house next to ours was completely demolished. And taken away, the sidewalk, there's no evidence of a house being there. It's really weird. But before it was taken down, I called the owner. I was like, are you going to pull stuff out of here? And he was like, no, you can have whatever you want or whatever. And I was like, what? So we literally pulled refrigerator and stove and washer dryer and dishwasher and all these things out of the ceiling fans and hot water heater. All this stuff was just going to go. And I was just like, and I stopped them, all the demolition. They had the big monster machine out front that was going to tear it down. And they sent a roll-off truck and a whole crew of people who were going to tear it down one day. I was like, excuse me, you guys have not decommissioned that air conditioning unit out there. And that is the number one thing we can do to address global warming on the drawdown list was surprising to me, and everyone who's ever seen the list is like, refrigerant management's the number one thing we can do. The most cost-effective thing we can do to reverse global warming is deal with refrigerants effectively. And so I literally called their owner, and I was like, I don't think you have permission to do this yet. You need to like get someone out here. He's like, oh, I'm on it right now. And those guys stood out there for a couple hours, and then they went away. And it was 2 days later, after the air conditioning person came, drained the lines of the fluid. So we all need to be vigilant. Like the business as usual kind of thing gets away with just way too much stuff that is super destructive and wasteful. But then I also want to say that the Land Development Code is being rolled out again, and be an advocate for green infrastructure, for green building techniques, for smart development, for things that will foster compact and connected, transit, and things that will make our lives in the long run, when all these people move here, more sustainable.
Great.
And I want to reinforce that point on the refrigerant. It is the most destructive greenhouse gas on the planet. So think about this. How many of you have had to have your home air conditioners recharged because it wasn't working right? Okay, that's the sign for you to have the air conditioning technician double check. Can they replace the hose so that there are no more leaks? Is there anything that can be done to prevent leaking refrigerant? It is an unbelievably destructive greenhouse gas. So if you can do that in your home air conditioning system, do it now when the weather starts to cool and you're not so dependent on it. Take care of it now. If it requires that you get a new system, make plans for that. During the off season, there are a lot of deals available from the air conditioning companies because they want business, but that is an incredibly damaging greenhouse gas. So take care of it on the home front and then urge it at your workplace. We, for instance, started looking at what's our practice at the county. And it took some pushing, and what I finally got was a handwritten log of the air conditioning repair people who would come to the different county buildings and recharge the systems. So we're now evaluating that countywide at all our facilities to say, what's a better way to deal with this? If it's a leaking hose that can be replaced, get it done now. If the system has to be replaced, put that in the plan and get to it as quickly as possible. But nobody had ever even thought to look at it, and they had to scrounge for a while to even find the written log that tracked the refrigerator repair people.
So this is a perfect lead into our next section. I'm going to check with our timekeeper, Mary. Okay, good. So it's a great...
For all of the questions?
We have 6 minutes, though, for this section of questions. And the next prepared question is, what are the city and Travis County and Williamson County and state government officials doing about the climate catastrophe that we find ourselves in?
I'll
Brandy,
say
you want to start?
about the broad policy initiatives, and then I think Brandy has more detail on what the city is doing, because the city has more resources and is further along than the county is. But both the city of Austin and Travis County have passed resolutions declaring a climate emergency. So that's the first step, to take official action. The city directed the city manager to come back with recommendations for actions that can be taken, and the county will follow the initial recommendations from the city and then see what else there is for the county to do that wasn't covered by the city.
Does the county have a database of other counties that have asked for emergency declarations?
We have not maintained a database. The question was, do we know of other counties that have asked for emergency declarations? ICLEI, which is the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives, is a resource for a lot of that, and might be able to tell you how many other counties in the country. There are other groups. The America's Pledge is the entity that has stepped up after Trump withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Summit. America's Pledge, which was partially funded by Tom Steyer, so I got to give him credit where it's due, basically pledged that and had individual governments, local governments, pledge that we are still in the Paris Climate Treaty. And so they are keeping a ledger of the communities that have pledged that. They may not be the same communities that have adopted a a policy on declaring a climate emergency, but there's probably some overlap.
I'm going to just be honest and say I'm a little disappointed about the way the whole thing has gone about this declaring an emergency, because the appropriate level of response that has not followed on kind of makes the whole thing fall flat to me. I mean, it really needs to be treated like an emergency. Like, we can't just continue business as usual and pretend that, you know, by declaring an emergency we did something. That's not actually doing anything. And so it's, but I have spent time, as was mentioned, in the mayor's office, and I know that the council members in general, they want to do good things. You mean, you like, please, like, come with creative solutions that can be implemented, and, you know, and a proposal. I, you know, can't tell you how hard it is to be on staff and know that every week you've got, you know, 70 to 100 items you've got to research, like, what do we think about this? I mean, not even the proactive, like, I want to create something good in the world, but just like dealing with what's coming to you and getting ready for it. So any organization that wants to have something happen, if they can come with well-researched data, with a plan, with verbiage, with, you know, a coalition of people who believe in this, much, much better chance of things getting passed. Like, super high chance. If it's positive and there's support for it and a lot of the legwork has been done, you're moving things along much more effectively. So I would say just be a good, or team up with good activists who kind of know how to work with council and with the county to put things in the order that they need to be, so that it's easy for the staff to deliver on shaping these policies and putting things in place.
I want to reinforce that too. Richard and the Dale and several other people here were involved in this, coming to the county, speaking to us during citizen communication, alerting my colleagues, because if it's just me saying this all the time, people get a little tired of it. But when citizens come and show up and beg your elected officials to take action, it resonates. So it is an important thing to do, and it is something where you can move the needle. You might feel like, you know, what can I really do? And yes, declaring the climate emergency, if we don't take action on the heels of it, then it's a sort of a meaningless gesture. I'm not interested in meaningless gestures.
I think we have to make it mean something. I think we need to follow up and be asking, you know, okay, what does that mean? What can we do? Get involved in the new climate plan. So we had a climate plan that was passed 5 years ago, and it, I would say, was largely internally focused on the city, like the city's fleet, the city's buildings, the city's operations, and protocols, and how they do their own commuting among their employees, things like that. So they've gotten good at that, and I'm, you know, hats off, but it's like, there's everybody else in the city. There's all the other buildings and all the other commuters and all the other everything that needs to be dealt with. And it really isn't a community climate plan until the community is involved in shaping it and in implementing it. And I think we need a lot more proactive talking to business groups, talking to schools, talking to all the different places that, sorry, I'm just gesticulating and making noise. All the different places where, you know, we can impact that level 3, you know, level 2 and 3, our friends and family, because, you know, we all work somewhere or know people or, you know, do business with, have connections where we can impact how things go.
So that's a perfect transition to our next section, which is audience participation. Mary's getting ready to take her microphone and go out there. You get ready to ask your question. But while you're doing that, just look at the way these two leaders are working together. Aren't they marvelous the way they work with each other? And so do we have a microphone for Mary?
I think Patty's looking for the microphone. I just want to underscore something Brandy said while we're waiting for the microphone. And I don't mean to just pick on this congregation, because everything that you're involved in, if it takes place at a large building, there's an opportunity to make use of this. When I got elected, we passed the PACE initiative, and we were the first county in Texas to do it, and it stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. It's a financing tool that solves the problem of the owners of buildings generally not paying the utility bills, so they've not had an incentive to make the buildings more energy or water efficient. PACE provides the financing mechanism that enables congregations to get financing to upgrade their air conditioning systems or upgrade their lighting.
You have to own your own building.
Right.
That's a wonderful idea.
Yeah,
Lighting,
and it's-
water, solar,
And
all that.
I'm happy to connect you to it, but if you just Google PACE Authority, PAC.
We are planning an
Authority.
extension to this building to make it more energy efficient, I hope. And we'll certainly look into that. Thank you.
And you can work with whoever owns the building to do that, because it makes your property more
Yeah.
valuable.
Right. Thank you so much. Here's the way the questions are going to go. So we have time for as many questions as possible. I would like you to state your name, what organization you represent, because there's a lot of different organizations, but please don't make any personal, because each one of us has our personal flag to fly, but we would like you to ask the question, state your name, your organization you represent, and your question, please. Okay.
So before we start, Mary, before we
Yes.
start, I just want to make sure you all know, 8-second delay coming up. But you can hear my voice too really well. Our Commissioner Shea is going to have to slip off here in about 20 minutes, so we just want to make sure that you all know that she has a county issue that she has to go help deal with. So she's not trying to leave early. So we just want to get as many questions in as we can before she leaves.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Susan Littman. Okay, I'm with Extinction Rebellion. This is
Bravo.
This is the symbol.
Bravo. That's an example of citizens getting engaged.
Yeah, you've seen people filling the streets in London, blockading, disrupting everything, and in New York and in other places. Do you think it will help in Austin if we have people that are out there saying it's a climate emergency, we have to do something big at the policy level?
Great question.
I'll just jump in. I think every level of citizen activism and engagement is helpful. I'm incredibly hopeful and inspired by Greta Thunberg and all the young people, the walkout from classes by young people. Extinction Rebellion, all of it I think is valuable, and I think it underscores the urgency of the issue. And Brandy's right. I mean, you know, people are pulled in lots of different directions, and if there's not a reminder that's compelling about what they have to focus on, they'll focus on whatever the other issue of the day is. So I think all of these things are valuable.
I would say yes. I would say it takes all kinds of activism to get things accomplished. So it takes the people willing to chain themselves to the tree or do the radical thing so that the people who are there at the table negotiating look very reasonable. You know, it's
Absolutely. That's very true.
Like if
That's
there's
very true.
not, if it's a layered approach, right? Like there's like the headline stuff, oh, okay, we should be paying attention to this. And then there's the barrage of letters and like the people like saying this is important, or the calls and the contacts to the offices. And then there's someone with a proposal. So I would say don't do it unless you have a proposal, but do it. Have a proposal and draw attention and get people engaged and have layers of activism to back it up so that we can move things forward.
My name's Daniel White. I represent myself, basically, in an organization. I would like to clarify something from what you're talking about with refrigeration. You're talking about there's actually two types of refrigeration. One uses water, one uses no water. Refrigeration uses no water, which is a pollutant. What you're talking about is chill water, which is not found in this, probably in this church or residential. That's refrigerant. Is that correct?
Well,
How
the
can
refrigerant-
you be using water in a refrigerant system?
Well, in large scale systems, they use evaporative
That's called a chill
cooling.
water. That's not a
Yeah.
refrigerant.
Well, but the refrigerant is what chills the water.
That's correct, but
So you have
but
refrigerant
it
in both
circulates.
systems.
But it circulates that water.
Right, but you have refrigerant in both systems, and both systems have the potential for leaking.
Oh, I agree on that. Yes,
Right.
we're not talking. I'm talking about using water. A chill water system is the only one that uses water.
Right, but so for large buildings, they use evaporated
Yeah.
water as their
Towers,
cooling
water
mechanism.
towers.
Exactly. And you can substitute the water supply and conserve your treated drinking water.
That is true, and I just want to point out that producing electricity is the largest consumer of energy, like on our city scale. So whenever you're consuming electricity, you're putting a tax, you're using a lot of water. And so to the degree you can reduce the amount of energy you're using, and the air conditioning unit in your house is probably one of the largest consumers of energy, you're also putting demand on water. So using less energy overall, well, and nobody has said it yet, but getting on a green energy program. So just have 100% of your energy. It's, the city keeps notching up the level. It's going to be at like 65%, renewable. That's good, but you can jump right up to 100 by getting on Green Choice or the solar program or the community solar program. There are ways for you to have your congregation or your home be purchasing 100% solar. So then if everything you do in your house, and if you plug in your electric vehicle, hopefully your next vehicle is going to be an electric one. I can tell you all the joys.
Same here.
Of driving
They both have
electric
leafs.
vehicle.
Yep.
Love it. Love it for all the reasons that have nothing to do with the earth. It's fast, it's quiet, it's smooth, it's just awesome. No maintenance.
Exactly. No gasoline bills, and you
So
can get
great.
them used for less than $10,000.
They're so great.
wow, that's
Anyway, but you can drive on the sun or drive on the wind and feel good about that part of your contribution to.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Angelina Puhe. I don't work with any organization specifically, but now a rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius, that is pretty much implausible. So there's a 1% chance that we can reach that. And 2 degrees is kind of near that. It's a 5% chance without bringing down technology like geoengineering. And so far that doesn't exist, but do you have any hope personally that could someday be implemented? It's now absolutely implausible. There is no it isn't any research towards a global scale experiment or something about geoengineering and how that could be our save all thing. Do you believe that could ever happen?
Wow, what a great question.
I listened to a TED Talk on this while I was painting my house recently, and it's interesting. It's a little scary, It's kind of trying to play God sort of thing. He's talking about geoengineering and seeding clouds or causing shade, putting aerosol in the air. One of the cheapest, most effective ones is just spraying water up in the air. Maybe. I would say that of the list of the drawdown technologies, we don't need to wait for any new ones. And I can't remember if that was in the 20 promising coming attractions. I don't know off the top of my head. Maybe you can look at that. But maybe is all I can say. But I am optimistic that we have the technology we need. We just need to get it in action and at scale. And thanks for being here.
Yeah,
Really.
absolutely. And I will say, I am hopeful. There are times when I despair. I do think humans are wired for survival. And I also am clear, I think we have a choice. We have a choice to despair or a choice to persevere. And so I will myself, even at times of great despair, to choose to persevere. But the other thing that, and oddly enough, here, I'll let you look at the coming attractions. Oddly enough, what I think may also be hopeful is the banks and the insurance and financial industry. For the first time, and I need to give this example, it's important. For the first time in history, last spring of this year, when our budget staff met with the bond rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and all of your local governments are very attuned to the bond rating agencies because it determines how much they pay to borrow money. So for the first time ever, the bond rating staff said to our staff, "Do you have a climate action plan?" And our staff freaked out. I know, I was like, oh my God. I had been pushing them since 2015 to do a climate action plan, and they said, we will get to it. It's just not the top of our list, but we will get to it. After that meeting with the bond rating agencies, they literally ran back to my office and they said, can you help us do a climate action plan? We have to do it right now. So I'm hopeful
that's what
about
needs to
that.
happen.
In a perverse way, the banks and the insurance companies and the financial institutions
Great.
are starting to ask the right questions.
Right.
Thank you.
There's
Next question.
Thank you. My name is Rebecca Allen, and I'm a member of a number of climate organizations. The one to write down is climatehealers.org. You may have heard of Dr. Salish Rao because he spoke at the Paris Climate Talks and the Marrakesh Climate Talks. And I'm wondering if either of you will be willing to look at a new white paper that he wrote referencing the IPCC recent data that's come out that says that the number one cause of climate change is animal agriculture. And if you're willing to do that, it comes to mind also about the water I wanted to ask you. I just looked it up. The average household around the country uses 300 gallons per household on average, and yet one burger on average is 1,600 gallons. So 300 gallons to one burger, and I'm wondering if you have heard of those. I've got another question too, but maybe I've taken it out of my paper.
2 questions is no.
So generally, but I think restating that and reminding people of that is really important. I know a lot of people, it sometimes can be difficult to talk to people about denying themselves a certain kind of food that they might like. So I've just talked to people about do it 1 day a week, just do a meatless Monday. You know, eat salads or something else instead of meat, because meat has such a harmful impact on the environment.
Would you be interested in that paper, that white paper on
Okay.
climate change?
Oh, sure.
Can I answer it partly with some images here? So this first one shows in the drawdown solutions what the top food-related impacts are that we can have to reduce global warming. And preventing food waste is number one. We can all do that. It makes sense. It makes no sense to waste food. You know, I gave a whole TED talk on that. You can search on trashing food, TED, Brandy, or Austin, whatever. You'll find it.
And you can compost, have chickens, let the chickens eat your waste food. You can do lots of things to reduce it.
Well, I'll get to the hierarchy in a second. And a plant-rich diet is right on on its tails. So eating a plant-rich diet does not mean going vegan necessarily, although if you make that choice, that's great. But RARE has done this research that said it kind of breaks down Americans into quintiles. Like 20% of American eats equivalent of like 3.5 burgers a day. And then there's another 20% that eats like 2-ish burgers a day. And then it goes down from there. And they say if 10% of Americans would just notch it down one, just cut back a little bit.
One burger a day.
It'll help America get back on track for the Paris targets, you know, which we know weren't quite enough. But it's like just that is going to have a huge impact. Matt, can you go forward?
I think we need to go to our next question, but
That's the food recovery hierarchy.
just leave that up. Okay.
That's fine. Actually, go forward just slowly to the next two so you can see it. So this is the impact of different kinds of diet. By cutting out meat, you can have more impact than all the transportation things that you could do, which is the next biggest.
Yeah, I think that's what she was talking about
Okay,
animal
you can go back.
agriculture. Yes, thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann Glenn, a member of St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. And my question to you is, there's an election coming up on November 5th. Do you support Proposition A or not support it, and why?
Good question.
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because there's
Tell people what Proposition A
enormous
is.
confusion about it. There are actually 2 Proposition A's on the ballot. The city of Austin, a Proposition A, relates to a citizen initiative that got this item on the ballot after people were angry about the soccer stadium. And this initiative will require, it won't allow essentially wealthy business owners like soccer team owners to be able to use public land without paying property taxes on it. The concern is the way it's written, that it would affect a lot of nonprofits that currently use city land for things like the Long Center, the Little League, the YMCA, the soccer groups, like the small-time, kids soccer things, not the professional soccer teams. And there is a lot of debate about A. I am not taking official positions on it. I have a personal view myself. But the other Proposition A is Travis County's Proposition A to renovate the Expo Center. It's the only large-scale event facility outside the downtown, so that you can get large events out of the downtown area. And it's in bad shape. It needs to be renovated, and the county doesn't have the money to do it. So that Travis County Proposition A, the Exposition Center, would allow us to access 2 pennies on the hotel-motel tax that is paid by tourists, not by local, unless you spend a lot of time in hotels. But, it's the mechanism to allow us to refurbish the Expo Center. I totally support that. The county unanimously put it on the ballot, and I would urge everyone to help spread that news because there is a lot of confusion. And then there's Proposition B on the city ballot, which would require an election to expand the convention center, and I do support that one. I think we should have an election. We had one the last time we expanded, the only other time we expanded the convention center, and I think this will be the largest public works or construction project in the history of the city. It's well over $1 billion. It involves tearing down the entire existing convention center, building a new one on the 3 blocks to the west, and then rebuilding the existing convention center. So I think that the voters should have a say in it. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. But the real bottom line is it's really essential to vote. I would encourage everyone. Please. That's probably one of the biggest single things you can do is vote.
Thank you so much, because I didn't realize there were 2 Proposition A's. Now it's making sense to me.
Thank you so much for asking.
Okay.
Hi, Barrett Sundberg from Windsor Park Neighborhood Association. And I will pass this around while I'm talking about it. This is our resolution that, as far as we know, is the first neighborhood resolution on climate change. It has a laundry list of about 15 things we're asking from legislators. I hope we can come through individually with as much research as Brandy, now I realize, is suggesting to bring.
What's your question?
So my question is joining together as a neighborhood, is that in that second and third range? And I'll pass around a sign-up list if people are interested in seeing the model or being on our list for updates and so on. So is that...
I'll just jump in quickly because I'm going to have to bug out. But
okay, we have one more question. Do you have from our...
Let her answer that one.
Yeah, I'll answer it really quickly. I think working at a neighborhood level is really essential. It's the friends and family rung of the rungs that friends, family, neighbors that Brandy was talking about. At the neighborhood level, you know your neighbors. Generally, you probably care about them, and you can educate them and help mobilize them to get involved. And I think a neighborhood resolution. So I really want to acknowledge Windsor Park for being the leader in this. In this area.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please
and
share
so,
that with me.
Share that. Maybe you can. Maybe even if people signed in, there's a way to put some resources online for them to access as well.
Yeah.
So Patty
why don't
says
you
that
have that out in
information's on the
the
action
foyer
table.
as we leave? And last, this is my guy. He's running for District 17.
Hi, Rick Kennedy, Democratic candidate for United States Congress, District 17. That just kind of rolls out instinctively at this point. 2 questions. One, if refrigerant management is the #1 issue or the #1 impact in the drawdown book, how impactful is that one thing? And is there a point of, say, 20 items down where we reach a point of stasis rather than reversal? That might be a doable first step.
Right. Can you go to the, Matt, can you go to the pinwheel? Oh, there. Thank you. So good. Okay, so starting with purple refrigeration up at the top, that's the largest. So this is a descending order of impact, and so the top 10 to 20, you can see what they are right there. Refrigeration, wind turbines, food waste, and plant-rich diet are right at the top. If you map the greens together, tropical forest, temperate forest, peatlands, agroforestry, there's a bunch of green things that are all related to forests. Those are also highly impactful. And then the most surprising thing is the pink there. Most people don't think about how educating women and girls and giving people more control over their ability to determine if and when they have children. If we were able to have that world where women and families could do that conscious planning, that could result in 100 million? Let me get the numbers real quick. 1 billion fewer people by mid-century, and have 120 billion tons of a gigaton reduction in what would otherwise happen was just business as usual. So women who are educated tend to get married later, tend to have fewer children, tend to be better educated and run their own businesses. They use money and steward it more responsibly. There's a lot of reasons, but just fewer people on the planet that need mouths to be fed is and not like through some draconian program, just giving people choice. So.
Okay, We have time for 2 quick questions.
Hi, I'm Dale Beulah.
Superhero.
I think we need some good news occasionally.
Yeah.
Amazon has just ordered 100,000 all-electric vans to deliver products, probably products you don't need or don't want, but you get them anyway. At least they'll come to you in a zero-emission vehicle. Budweiser just announced that they're retrofitting their delivery trucks for all-electric vehicles so that you can get your beer emission-free. And also,
Your question?
yeah, my question is, when World War II was declared, within 18 months, General Motors switched from building cars to building airplanes, tanks. It can happen very quickly when
Right.
this country is committed to it. And tell us some of your optimistic future.
One of them. Because we're almost out of time.
Okay. My optimistic future is that you guys are here, that you are not just looking for yourself, but what you can do beyond that. You guys can be the heroes in the story of your life. And I encourage you to think about, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what do you want to be able to claim you did in this moment in time when there was an emergency? It was declared, it's official, but really, it was an emergency before it was declared. And what impact do you want to have on your neighbors, your schools, your places of work, the country? Like, you have the opportunity to use your life force to have a tremendous impact. And really think about what you want the story of your life to be, and as it pertains to this arc of history on how things go on climate.
Thank you. And our last question.
I'm Bob Murray, representing all future generations, beginning with mine. And I wanted to pass along some encouragement that has helped me. If you ever need some encouragement, Bill McKibben told me, I said, how do you keep from getting discouraged? And he said, well, I get discouraged, but I don't stay discouraged, and here's how. I remind myself, this is the greatest challenge humankind has ever faced. It is my privilege to be able to contribute in that struggle.
Yes.
Great.
We live at the most
Thank you,
exciting
Bob.
time in history. Yeah. As Paul Hawkins says, we live in the most exciting time in history. Like, if you want to have the opportunity to have your life matter and make a difference, you showed up at the right time.
Okay, you got 5 minutes for closing. Make it 3.
3. You have 3. I think she's just closing now.
Okay. Let's see. I'm going to close by, I think, transportation. Well, things you can do personally. I teamed up with a group this spring called RARE, and they tried to distill down the list of drawdown and the most impactful things that are out there. It's fine. You can just turn it off. The things that we can do to be most impactful, and they came up with an A through G mnemonic, sort of memory list. So A is adopt a plant-rich diet. We talked about that and the importance of that. B is buy carbon offsets. There are issues with this from the past, but we need to overcome them, and we need to be able to invest in things that are outside of our particular geography that will make a difference. C is contract for green energy. I mentioned Green Choice earlier. It's a set it and forget it kind of thing. Once you make that one phone call and make that one decision, put it in place, you're mitigating your biggest impact, your biggest personal impact, which is the electricity associated with your home or business. The next, D is don't waste food. Again, we talked about that, and I'll again point to, there are TED Talks on it, including mine and others, that explain why this is important, but putting food in a landfill is the absolute worst place it could go. Breaks down anaerobically, creates greenhouse gases, it's a missed opportunity to feed people, animals, create compost, or use for other industrial uses. E is electric vehicle. Make a pledge to yourself that your next vehicle is going to be an electric one. You just plan ahead, start thinking about it, start dreaming about it, start thinking about, whether you need any extra space on your breaker box to set this up, but make it real. And then ask your workplace to support it as well. So many more people will buy an electric vehicle if they can drive to work and charge while they're there. And that, businesses leading this can really drive consumer behavior. We also have to put some pressure on the automobile companies. They're not putting forth their electric vehicles first. They make less money on them because there's almost no maintenance. It's like there's so little to do with an electric vehicle. There's, I mean, many, 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 many fewer parts. There's no transmission, no carburetor, no, radiators, all these different things. It's just a motor, and it has very few problems. So, so we need to make it clear that we want this, we demand it. And then F is fly one last time. And this is not for your one trip to go see grandma, don't have that fit, but the business travelers who travel 5 or more trips a year to fly one last trip. And in general, think about it before you go anywhere. Do I really need to go to this place and be there in person? Or could I accomplish this with a phone call, with a Zoom meeting, with some other form, or combining it with another trip? Our transportation impacts in Austin are our biggest boogaboo, because it doesn't just cause emissions, it causes congestion, which causes more emissions, but it causes loss of quality of life. The more time you spend in traffic, the unhappier you are. And so I will jump from transportation. Well, I just want to point out that in Austin, the total emissions between 1990 and 2017 for transportation went up 178%. That's terrible. And up 12% per person. So this is where we really need to get our heads around how we're going to deal with this. I personally think that carpooling is a vastly underutilized tool. Bridget and I carpooled here. Everyone who came here came from a part of town where at least one other person was coming from. I think we need to be making it easier for people to map onto their calendars who's going and how can we get there together, or what transit options are available, those kinds of things. Deal with the food, learn more about food. It is, eating local, eating lower on the food chain have a huge impact on what you're doing. And in general, just keep seeing yourself as part of the solution team. You are the superheroes out there. If you were willing to spend a couple hours here, you're high up in that concerned, alarmed bucket, and you can be a big part of the solution. So thank you for being here and for your attention.
Before we go to the, I'm still on delay here, but as it's coming up, I wanted to share with you a couple of things outside of the immediate in-home things that are critically important that Brandy just listed. We are owners as Austinites and as Central Texans people and as Texans in the coal-fired Fayette Power Plant. And the coal-fired Fayette Power Plant is a catastrophic disaster. And as owners, we're not exercising our ability as owners to do anything about it. Some people are. 360 Austin, and 350 Austin, thank you. I always want to say 360. 350 Austin, yeah, 360 Bridge, right. 350 Austin and other groups are, Extinction Rebellion and other groups are starting to raise the alarms about this terrible disaster we face. Why is it a disaster? Just think of this. Now, I have a picture, and you can't quite see it, but this picture tells us in 2019, the CO2 emissions, which is one of the biggest causes of climate catastrophe, the CO2 emissions at the plant we own is 4 million metric tons, 4 million metric tons a year. And it has been going that way since we built the place. And it's going to continue to go that way until we shut it down.
There is a plan to shut it down.
There is a timeline to shut it down. There's no planning. There's only a timeline. There's no plan to decommission the plant. And it's coming up on 2022 when we propose to decommission Austin's 1/3. But the LCRA, which we are also owners of because we're Texans, owns 2/3 of that plant. So we have an unmitigated disaster on our hands, not just the millions of tons the hundreds of millions of tons of CO2, but the water that Bandy talked about and Bridget talked about, the water from the Colorado River of 17,000 acre feet a year goes to cool that plant and then can't be reused, or isn't currently being reused. We could probably figure that out, but we don't. And the last part of the unmitigated disaster is there's a killer coal ash pile there that is uncontained and leaks into the ground, and it's causing a poisoning of the water table underneath. So it's poisoning all people down river from that plant. So if you want to work on one thing exterior to your personal life, that's one opportunity to look into. And the LCRA continues their criminal behavior by having recently bought the water rights under the Boy Scout property out there in Fayette County, and they're going to pump all that water out to Lee County and other counties to supply water to new people moving in out there. And of course, if you own land in Fayette County or in Bastrop County or Lee County, that's water that you've been counting on to live with for years. So we have a real problem with that. We can do something about that. We own those plants. We own that plant. So as you think about the things that you're concerned about and you're alarmed about, that's one thing that has huge results if we can take out those millions of tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere and stop that coal ash poisoning of our land and water. So I just wanted to make sure that that's one thing you can pick out about. Out there on the table, you will see a reference to the 2019 U.S. Call to Action on Climate, Health, and Equity, a public policy agenda. This was put together by 74 U.S. health organizations. It is terrific. It gives a real plan in many different areas to work on climate catastrophe. And the last, I just wanted to bring your attention, is this climate mobilization document. And the reference will be out there in one of the reference papers. It gives you specific step-by-step actions to do what Barrett has done and organize around neighborhoods. Neighborhoods are critical to do that. So without further ado, we're going to have a little video here. I think, Matt, are you ready for that? Okay, so here's a little video that we're going to leave you with before I do the final.
My name is Greta Thunberg. I am 15 years old and I'm from Sweden. I speak on behalf of Climate Justice Now. Many people say that Sweden is just a small country and it doesn't matter what we do. But I've learned that you are never too small to make a difference. And if a few children can get headlines all over the world just by not going to school, then imagine what we could all do together if we really wanted to. But to do that, we have to speak clearly, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. You only speak of green, eternal economic growth because you are too scared of being unpopular. You only talk about moving forward with the same bad ideas that got us into this mess, even when the only sensible thing to do is pull the emergency brake. You are not mature enough to tell it like it is. Even that burden you leave to us children. But I don't care about being popular. I care about climate justice and a living planet. Our civilization is being sacrificed for the opportunity of a very small number of people to continue making enormous amounts of money. Our biosphere is being sacrificed so that rich people in countries like mine can live in luxury. It is the sufferings of the many which pay for the luxuries of the few. The year 2078, I will celebrate my 75th birthday. If I have children, maybe they will spend that day with me. Maybe they will ask me about you. Maybe they will ask why you didn't do anything while there still was time to act. You say you love your children above all else, and yet you are stealing their future in front of their very eyes. Until you start focusing on what needs to be done rather than what is politically possible, there is no hope. We cannot solve a crisis without treating it as a crisis. We need to keep the fossil fuels in the ground, and we need to focus on equity. And if solutions within this system are so impossible to find, then maybe we should change the system itself. We have not come here to beg world leaders to care. You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time. We have come here to let you know that change is coming, whether you like it or not. The real power belongs to the people. Thank you.